Would you support a mandatory environmental service for adults 18 to 30? Kind of like military service, but instead of fighting you must spend a few months on reforestation projects or ocean cleanup. Why or why not? Pay them to do it. Even if it's just 3 hours a month or something minuscule like that, pay them. Do not make it mandatory and without reward, otherwise people will grow to resent the cause. It will also make teens dread it if enough people complain enough. This question was asked already, nearly verbatim, a month or two ago. Edit. Don't know how to insert the link, but here's the URL: https://www.reddit.com/r/askreddit/comment/bn3bpz/would_mandatory_environmental. No, and it's always the young and relatively privileged members of society that put forward these suggestions, having little understanding of the hardships it would place on the less privileged masses. Nah. I don't really support any mandatory service. No. For starters, a lot of people in mid-20s already have stable jobs, families, and loans for house or student loans. And some have a baby. Imagine being forced to go to mandatory service and not being able to pay your loan, losing your job and forcing your partner and baby to live on minimal income. What is if your partner is on maternity/paternity leave? I absolutely stand against something like that. Mandatory government service in general is just a load of crap in my opinion, but apart from that, does anyone ever use the damn search bar? This is like the 8th time I've seen this question posted this year, and the consensus is always the same. Wonder if we can make it 9 by the end of the year. As soon as you say mandatory, you lost me. The government shouldn't force me to do anything. Not at all. To begin with, government service mandates such as draft registration, mandatory military service in other countries, etc. are a massive governmental overreach IMO. And forcing folks to do things they don't really want to do just leads to half-assed work or minimum effort. Would rather see the government reward companies for doing the right things by the environment and people instead of rewarding them for excessive douchebaggery like we do now. No, because people shouldn't be made to do something against their will. I get that it happens all the time already. Stop posting these fucking would you feel bullshit questions. The government's got too much power as it is. Why give them more? No. It's economically inefficient and will build resentment toward the program. Tax people and hire professionals to do those jobs. No, and for several reasons. Mandatory service is something I generally do not support. In addition, what is the point of a mandatory service to help with the environment if some people legit do not care? They may not only do a shitty job, make things worse, but have even more resentment towards environmental movements. Edit. I am going to provide a personal example to clarify. I did a ton of field work with a project that aimed to assess the biodiversity in a small mountain range that is between human-developed areas. Despite being really close to people, the place had an amazing abundance of plant and animal species. Companies would occasionally send their employees over for a kind of teamwork/volunteer exercise thing that would last the entire weekend, which I thought was ridiculous anyways, but hey, we needed the money. The volunteers were given basic stuff to do that helped out with the project: plant counts, assessing camera trap photos, hiking on trails to try to find spoor if they are up for it, etc. They not only did a poor job at that, I don't blame them as they were forced to do it and really do not have enough training, but the area was absolutely trashed almost every time afterwards. Like, during the evenings and mornings, some of them would want to take group walks and would leave their trash a mile out, and we would have to spend the next day or so looking for said trash. They would also occasionally disturb the wildlife either directly or indirectly. On top of that, many of them would get drunk at night and vocally state how they truly did not give a fuck and were just here because they had to go. That is why I do not like mandatory environmental volunteer services. Mandatory, no. I prefer giving credits for social service like certificates/awards that can be converted into points in job interviews or college admissions. It will encourage social service among youths, I guess. Are you 31? That's called slavery, and there is no discussion to be had. Now, if there was a quid pro quo as it were, as in, 4 years of college for 4 years of service, you might just kindle a reasonable discussion. Not, you would be better off spending that money incentivizing research on better industrial practices. Because forced labor is fucking slavery. How about non-violent prisoners get the option of mandatory environmental service instead of jail time or fines? This is bait. No. Because slavery was outlawed a few years back. This is ridiculous. Absolutely not. Governments should not have the authority to demand labor from their citizens with the threat of punishment. That's something a king would do. I do like the idea of voluntarily helping the environment though. And I think the voluntary, paid model put forth by the top comment here makes a lot of sense. Since slave labor proven to be inefficient, I don't support that idea. What kind of insane totalitarian liberal bullshit is this? Even though I would like more involvement in those ideas, I think this idea would backfire. I think you'd push people to resent the cause behind the forced labor, and in time, you'd go backwards rather than make progress. Better to find a way to reform capitalism at large scale, or take that time to do education on personal finance, emotional intelligence, how to avoid greed, etc., to work towards solving the systematic problems causing the global issues in the first place. Nope, mandatory service would just expand the already bloated power of the state. I'm against expanding the powers of the state. Plus it would just be used as an opportunity for the state to attempt to indoctrinate people, which I don't agree with. Think PSAs but a part of the service training program, because you are a captive audience and the state just can't help itself. Now if it were to be voluntary service like AmeriCorps or New Deal style jobs, that would have my full support. I prefer to volunteer, not be voluntold. Mandatory? No. Not yet, at least. I do encourage young folks to look into AmeriCorps, though, which we could expand if the political will existed. No, mostly because it will not do any good. Aside from reducing carbon output, the developed nations need to understand the value of the forests in their countries and, probably more importantly, the forests in developing nations, and then pay a fate annual stipend for those forests to be left in place and for deforested land to be replanted. Unless we put key economic incentives in place, nothing else matters. The short-term dollar will win out every time. As a substitute for military service in my country, sure. It's better than going to jail. I would not support this, but I think it would be cool if there were more things like reforestation projects that were made by the government. The thing with military service is that there is a clear chain of command that flows in one direction, top down. There are real-world consequences if you don't perform your duties or don't fall in line. Are you ready to throw someone in the brig for not planting enough trees? Or talking back to the higher up because they're in pain that day or the weather is shitty or whatever? No. This idea is preposterous on so many levels it doesn't even begin to compute. And why the environment? Why not so many other causes that need help? Nope. Honestly, nothing should be mandatory like this. I have a life and things actually want to do. The only mandatory thing I support is sleep. Sounds like a good way to get a lot of people to resent environmental service. No. Maybe it's my inner libertarian, but I hate the idea of mandatory anything. Let people do what they want, but maybe provide incentives to do that kind of work, voluntarily. No, I don't support any kind of mandatory labor. That's a hard no. No, because I have a life to live. Not free/incentivize with money or some other means of reason to do it. Discounts, tax cuts, something relative. Remove the word mandatory and replace it with the word paid and you got my full support. Anything with the word mandatory is bound to end in disaster and tyranny. This is dumb as fuck, dude. That's just slavery with extra steps. I support this, but it must absolutely be changed to 55 to 75 years old. I don't support any sort of forced servitude. Would love to see a 100% volunteer rate. Absolutely not government mandated though. Fuck that. Not mandatory, but an available option would be great. Also, offer tax breaks on income received during this service. Problem is, it would never work currently. There are too many people who care much more about promoting/making money off of war than helping the environment, and they would be hysterical if we were paying people for that amount of environmental conservation. They would call it big government while ignoring the fact that that's exactly what the majority of military spending is. So, slavery. This would be a very totalitarian idea. Here, corporations and consumers have absolutely destroyed the planet from business practices and overconsumption. We're going to make, most likely a majority of working class people, clean up everyone else's mess without good pay. Working class and poor people literally do not have the time to volunteer when time spent not working equals bills not being paid. A better idea would be to have corporations go green, and hopefully ditch plastic packaging. Or, to have corporations take responsibility for their own waste rather than make working class people volunteer. That's fucking retarded. Planting trees will never make a difference, but for some reason it's the only tangible change liberals can come up with, so they latch onto it. Regulating top industries and manufacturers is where change is done, but you can't make cute stickers about it to put on your hydro flask. Sounds like a prison sentence. Forced labor. Perhaps start with imprisoning those in power that are responsible for or those in power that refuse solutions to this ecological disaster. No, we already have people with liberal arts degrees to do that kind of work. I don't like the idea of the government forcing me to do shit. Unfortunately, no one will do anything until it's illegal not to. Like, I want to say I'm all for smaller government involvement, but until the government gets involved, people and companies are kind of the absolute worst. The trade-off, of course, being instead of being mandatory, there is incentive behind be more environmentally friendly. Historically it's been done with exploited tax breaks. No. The government controls my life in enough direct ways already. And what's to say such program is really going to make a difference anyways? What about when we find out that it's actually creating more pollution from buses of people going out into the forest, who in turn litter there and walk off the trail, destroying the understory? Why should individuals in nations like the USA and Europe be held responsible for countries who still actively dump their trash at sea and are the source of the litter? Cough China. Cough India. Cough Africa. Until we hold the main producers of this pollution accountable, nothing will change. So no, I don't think mandatory environmental service is a smart or feasible idea. What about the people who are trying to support a family? Do they just not work? Not get paid? The homeless? Those with kids or disabled relatives to care for? It would get complicated with different situations, and I don't think it's right for any mandatory duty, except jury duty, given it's a short amount of time and normally only once. Naive Redditor suggests forced labor for something he believes in. Nah, the government/corporations would exploit the shit out of it, unfortunately. If anything, they would use it as an excuse not to pour the money needed to cleaning up the environment or tax polluting corporations. Then through some twisted campaign finance corruption, you would just end up cleaning up rich people's neighborhoods and parks. The same ones who run the corporations that are doing the actual pollution. Maybe not mandatory, but like, if you do it, your taxes will be 20% less for 5 years or something, you know? No, because I don't support any mandatory things like that. I would support letting non-dangerous prisoners to opt to go do it instead of prison. Also work something out where people can do that to pay off debts like tax debts. But if someone is a genius and wants to go to college to become a scientist or a doctor, or if someone is an amazing ballerina and is recruited for NYC Ballet etc., it's a waste of their time and what they can offer the world to go do that instead of getting educated and performing or perfecting their craft etc. Eco-fascism is still fascism. No, I like the sentiment but not a fan of any type of conscription. My Korean friend just came back from conscription and hated it, and he didn't even want to do it in the first place. Maybe some sort incentive like extra credits in uni, or if it looked good on your resume. I think this should start in like 2nd grade. Sure. I'm out of the age bracket. No, this is America. So they can keep cleaning up corporations' mistakes? Less than 100 companies are responsible for over 70% of worldwide greenhouse emissions. Until you get them in line with environmentalism, why should the proletariat be required to fix the problems of the 1%? Not at all. I do my share to not pollute, but they need to stop acting like consumers are responsible for cleaning the earth when it's the corporations that are destroying it in the first place. Make a mandatory service for the companies. No, because it is the corporations polluting the world. If we don't stop them, then any other efforts are useless. That could be rewarding, I guess, but I could foresee something like draft dodging happening. Big cumulative hit to the economy, I'm sure. A few months. Envirodraft. Like all government/regulatory things, it depends. On paper it sounds cool, but who knows how the gov will fuck that one up. I mean, telling everyone that they should hasn't worked. No. Having spent 2 years doing that kind of thing for my degree, I would have gone insane trying to do it right with conscripts that didn't want to be there. Maybe it could be in lieu of something, or a choice among many, like Italy will let you out of mandatory military service if you become an EMT for this 2 years instead. No, but I'll support mandatory environmental service for corporations. Pay them to do it, make it not mandatory, make it so anyone can help, no questions asked. This helps against homeless people, helps teens wanting a bit of cash, and helps the environment. Holy shit, how many times does this "do you support slavery" question get asked? LMAO, fuck you, pay me. I would. Otherwise we'll die sooner, and animals don't deserve such fucked up planet to live in. Absolutely. It would not only give everyone a shared sense of responsibility to the environment, but also stimulate the economy in a big way through works and projects, as well as provide training to an up-and-coming workforce. Pay homeless people to collect trash. No, slavery isn't a good idea. 100% yes, I would support this, because I am older than 30. I'm not a fan of mandatory anything. Not mandatory, but there was a voluntary program like this in the US in the Depression. It was called the Civilian Conservation Corps. Participants got room and board, clothing, job training, and $30 a month, of which $25 had to be sent home. Most were single young men, so it went to their parents and younger siblings, in exchange for working on various projects on public land throughout the country. The reasons for it were both to provide jobs and because the Dust Bowl had opened people's eyes to the fact that the US was not a bottomless well of natural resources. Erosion was a big cause of the Dust Bowl, and the Dust Bowl was a factor in the Depression, so it all tied together. They were also called Roosevelt's Tree Army, because one of the big things they did was plant trees for erosion control. In my state, they built most of the state parks, a lot of them in areas that had been deforested for charcoal manufacturing and were marginal for agriculture. You can still rent out cabins that they built, and they're great, really attractive, and shockingly inexpensive. I'm actually going to stay in one next week. Some of them have photos from the CCC days on the walls, and it's really neat to look at them and know that you're still enjoying what they worked on. I'd definitely support a program like that today, but I think making it voluntary is putting ethical considerations to one side. More practical for one thing, you would have to pay participants, just like people drafted for military service get paid, and it would be very expensive if everyone did it. Plus, having it be voluntary means the number of participants can be matched the amount of meaningful work to be done, and the workers are more motivated. With the CCC, people considered themselves lucky to be picked. $30 a month was an attractive wage, and 3 square meals every single day was a significant perk, so discipline was straightforward: do what you're supposed to do or get kicked out, and most people didn't want to get kicked out. It would probably take stronger incentives to get the same level of buy-in today, but healthcare and student loan forgiveness would be a good start. I'm not into slavery in any form. I'm not a fan of your age range. That's an age that's already under assault from loan vendors, competitive job markets, family needs, etc. The last thing you need to be doing is putting more of a burden on them. I do. however, think it should be a requirement for high school graduates. I think we should do that, but not for young adults but for seniors, since they are the ones that ducked it up, so they get to fix it again. No, as I'm an American and I'll be fed in the A in jail before I'm forced to do anything. I volunteer my time to help the disabled, worked for 6 years at a camp for diabetic children making less than minimum wage, donate to organizations to help plant trees and build habitats for animals in urban areas. I do enough. I don't need the government telling me how to act, as all it will lead to is a profit for them and their lobbyists' companies. No, because whilst the environment is very important, I still think severely inconveniencing someone who may have to work, go to university, etc. There are better and more important things to tackle before we start doing things like this. The absolute biggest danger of global warming is melting ice, rising temperatures, etc. etc. This won't do anything to tackle that. I'm also very opposed to any form of mandatory service. The moment this became acceptable, it would be acceptable for them to say, well, this demographic is more prone to violence, let's conscript all of this demographic into the military to instill a rigid structure of discipline. Fuck no. Some people have dreams. No, I shouldn't be forced to fix previous generations' mistakes. Easy California. This is a terrible idea. It would ruin the lives of every person who has a family, bought a house, has a steady job, etc. Plenty of people have mentioned protections and assistance during this time, but is the government going to pay me $100K a year salary to match mine and give me 6 weeks of PTO? The answer is no, and keep this idea away from any politicians. Fuck no, because quite frankly I don't give a shit and would rather spend that time pursuing a career and spouse. No, I don't support any mandatory service. Fuck no, nothing should be mandatory in a free country. Are you retarded? I think that people on welfare should have to do this. LOL, fuck off, I already work 70 to 80 hours a week. Won't make a difference. Other countries cause the problems. Hell no. Unless I'm getting paid and work/school works around it. Fuck that. You know how people feel about jury duty? Imagine if you're told you have to leave your home, go to the middle of the ocean or forest or wherever and have to do backbreaking labor for whatever shit the government will pay you for months. How about no? This sounds dumb. Well, sure. But remember, to solve the climate crisis we must solve corruption first. I would support it more if the fuckers who fucked it up in the first place did it. Our youth has been handed the problem, they didn't create it. I wouldn't want it to be mandatory, but the government should without a doubt promote environmental action. Maybe even offer benefits like slightly reduced taxes or something like that. It's a little hard to do cleanup when I work 6-12 HR days. Instead, I just attempt to keep the stuff I do clean. This would be a logistical nightmare. It is one thing for 2 years of mandatory military service, as many countries do, but imagine the environmental impact of millions of people doing mandatory service. It would probably undo any work the service is capable of doing. Better to spend that money building up the Conservation Corps and making it a viable job that people would apply for. Then you get a large group of people who really care and can actually provide for a family and a professional future as well.